Hello everyone. We may not have gotten the long-awaited Starfish story update yet, but the new world underneath, chapters 20 to 24, gave us some amazing lore and emotional moments. I am Princess Farron, and today we're traveling through the Deepspace Tunnel to unpack them all. Chapter 20, The Lucky Loop. This one is related to our sleepy bunny Xavier. It starts with a final love letter. My dear, I hope this letter finds you. This is the last letter I'll write. In the end, the history of Philos and its immortality has failed to outlive humanity. I feel a little happy, even. The letter is addressed to the human wife of an unnamed Philosian man. He expresses that Philos and its so-called immortality is now gone, and with that loss, he finally feels human, no longer cursed by eternal life. We already knew Phyllis was on the brink of collapse. It depended on human lives to endure. That's exactly what Xavier was fighting against. So now, with confirmation that Philos is no more, I believe this is the result of one of the choices MC and Xavier made. Possibly in Xavier's myth where stars scatter, where MC chooses to save him, even if it means facing the end of Cinderspell. In the letter, the man says Philos was a wasteland created by humans, a society where immortality drained all meaning from life. They couldn't die, but they also had no desire to leave. And as we saw in Where Stars Scatter, this Philosian describes how Philos masked sacrifice as a noble tradition, sending people into the forest where the heart of the planet lay, claiming it was for peaceful recuperation. But this raises a question. How did Philosian even meet a human woman from Earth? The man explains. At the edge of Philos, he found a cosmic vortex. He jumped into the vortex, his body scattered through time itself, where moments stopped flowing in order. Eventually, he arrived on Earth before the age of immortality. That's when he met the woman who would become his wife. They spent 30 years together, but as time passed, she aged while he remained the same. People began mistaking them for mother and son. Eventually, she told him their journey together had to end in this lifetime. They had one final meeting in 2034, the same year the Deepspace Tunnel appeared. Her hair was white, but her eyes remained vivid and beautiful. His eyes, however, like all Philosians, were empty. That moment reminded me of Voyage of the Outcast, when Xavier's eyes briefly went lifeless. Remember that? He also mentions that Earth was primitive at the time, so much so that he couldn't even travel to other timelines. This tells us something important. Time and space travel were common in Philos, and likely not exclusive to the backtrackers. As they approached the Deepspace Tunnel, his wife pushed him into it and told him to write if there was ever an interstellar post office in space. As he was pulled into the current, he said, "I feel lucky to have met you." Then the perspective shifts to another character, courier number 170,043. So apparently there really is an interstellar post office, which is such a cool concept, by the way. Courier 170,043 chats with a colleague, and they casually mention that star sectors are constantly being born and vanishing. In real-world astronomy, galaxies take billions and billions of years to form or disappear. So, for these couriers to witness that in real time, it suggests they're not ordinary beings. Either they have extremely long lifespans, or there's something else entirely. We'll get to that soon. At the time of their conversation, Philos was 7% into its dissolution. 170,043 retrieves another letter from his friends, addressed to Earth. He and his companion sit down and quietly watch Philos end. The atmospheric shell around the planet vanishes and a time current devours it. The air crystallizes and falls like snow. Honestly, is this Zayne's doing? It certainly looks like it is. There's also the image of the crown falling, just like in the Traversing Deep Space trailer, where the hourglass runs out, buildings crumble, and everything fades to dust. The clues were there from the very beginning. We just didn't have enough context to understand them back then. In their final moments, the Philosians finally show emotion, embracing and kissing loved ones. It's haunting, isn't it? That only in their final moments, they wanted to feel human again. The Philosian man embraces his old friend. The courier, in turn, searches his memory bank to recall their first conversation. And here's where it gets really interesting. This courier is likely not a biological being, he's more like a machine, or perhaps something more advanced. Soon after, the Philosian dissolves into cosmic dust. To honor his late friend, 170,043 decides to deliver the letter to Earth, along with all the others that never managed to get through. He travels through a cosmic rift and lands in a garden on Earth, exactly where his friend's wife lives. A little girl spots him. As he moves through the garden toward the old woman, he notices his metal components are corroding. Earth's atmosphere is affecting him, so yes, he's mechanical in nature. This reminds me of Ever's experiments in the abyssal chaos, trying to preserve consciousness after death. Except here, the materials aren't stable on Earth. Unless they were created by Ever on a different planet. That's possible, since Ever had ties to Philos. Also, does this description remind anyone else of MC and Caleb and the Decoherent Smith? Their exoskeletons, tempered memories, and altered emotions? I can't help but feel there's a connection here. Could it be that the choices our love interests make ripple out and affect the fate of the others? Back to the story. The old lady immediately recognized the courier as a messenger and asks for the letter. The courier decides to remain on Earth, waiting to retrieve a reply out of respect for his friend. While waiting, he finds an abandoned spacecraft nearby. It disrupted the magnetic field, and inside, he senses an essence similar to his old friend's. The ship, of course, belongs to Xavier. This triggers a memory back to when he met his friend for the first time, during one of Philos' rituals. His friend was being condemned as an anti-Philosian dissident. When asked to defend himself, he argued passionately that immortality had made him forget how to be human, to feel love and appreciate the little joys of life. His words resonated with Xavier, the Crown Prince, and with MC, who was watching nearby. Still, he was declared guilty. His punishment? A glorious rite, being fed to the planet's heart. Seeing that the courier might be a fellow dissident, the man reached out and explained that he once made a promise that humans would achieve immortality through love. And fittingly, he revealed that Philos means love. Here's another breadcrumb. The courier says that once his energy is depleted, he'll return to his original body. So we're dealing with consciousness transfer, but we still don't know if his original body is human, machine, or something else. Eventually, he delivers a letter to his friend, who promises to write a reply. As he dissolves into fuel, he echoes the same words. I feel lucky to have met you. 3 days later, the courier returns to the garden. The old lady has passed, but she left behind a letter. It reads, Thank you, Mr. Mailman. I feel lucky to have met you. This part honestly got me teary-eyed. The courier reads the letter in a cafe. Just as MC and Xavier walk in, he recognizes them, believing the former prince may one day restore life's meaning. He gives them one final message, meant for a friend who no longer exists. I feel lucky to have met you. Xavier is confused at first, but as MC smiles, he repeats the words back to her. And in that moment, the courier feels as though he's finally heard those words returned, words his friend longed to hear. Truly bittersweet and beautifully written. Okay, deep breath. that one hit hard. Ready for more cosmic heartbreak? Good. Let's move to chapter 21. Dusk to Autumn. First of all, I just want to point out that the titan of Dusk is
Astrias.
I actually talked about him briefly in my Myth Unveiled video about Caleb, specifically during the section where I mentioned Zayne. So I find it very curious that they chose this exact title for the chapter related to Zayne. Just a little detail, but an interesting one. This chapter focuses on the white-haired boy we first met during the Death and Rebirth update. We now learn his name, Shubai. Small linguistic nerd moment. Shubai can mean several things depending on pronunciation. Shubai, several hundred, which could hint that he's been around for hundreds or even thousands of years, diligently watching over the emissary. Shubai, to fail or to be defeated, which might suggest that he's failed in his mission before or is destined to. Shubai, a term related to cousins, meaning descended from the same grandfather or great-grandfather. And that one raises some fascinating implications that Shubai and Zayne may share the same cosmic lineage. This last one gives me chills. This chapter begins with Shubai surrounded by human children. Moments before, he had been in a lecture hall studying how to best serve the emissary when a massive rift opened at the junction where the fractal library branches into different worlds. Acting on the administrator's orders, Shubai entered the rift since the emissary had just been found. Following Baizhe through the rift, Shubai struck his head on a tree stump. When he woke up, he was rescued by a doctor named Althea, Zayne's mother, though Shubai doesn't know that yet. Curiously, her name comes from the Greek Althea, possibly linked to Alphos, meaning healing. Zayne's father, Jace, is also nearby, and his name is derived from Yason, which also means healer or to heal. I just found it interesting that both of Zayne's parents are doctors, as we already knew, and that their names happen to carry healing connotations. I had to mention it. So at the time, Yere is under attack by Wanderers and is temporarily declared a no-hunt zone. Eventually, Shubai regains enough clarity to ask what year it is. The answer, 2035, 1 year after the Deepspace Tunnel appeared, and the same year Zayne entered Lincoln Medical School. Realizing he's not in Lincoln City, Shubai asks Althea if she knows anyone who is tall, cold, and with a hard ice core. The funny thing, she doesn't recognize anyone like that. There's also an interesting moment when Shubai notices the autumn leaves half green, half yellow for the first time. Despite having observed humans for ages, he has never seen leaves in this state, because the fractal library exists in a perpetual spring. Which makes sense, it's a repository of worlds, while Earth, as we know, may be approaching its wintertime. Its end. While waiting for the Wanderer threat to pass, Althea shows Shubai a photo of Zayne and describes her son as tiny, adorable, and soft. Which is hilarious because that's the complete opposite of how Shubai sees him. A blade forged from frost and snow, standing above every world fated for erasure. And there it is, stated plainly. Zayne is meant to be the destroyer of worlds, the god of annihilation. Once the crisis ends and Shubai prepares to leave, Althea gives him a hoodie that once belonged to Zayne, one with an angry carrot design. And I had to bring this up because Zayne's hatred for carrots has been a real thing since childhood. And funnily enough, Shubai likes it. They really have a lot in common. Shubai also witnesses a call between Zayne and his parents. Althea tells her son, everyone should have something they like the best. That puzzles Shubai. He's never had a favorite. Every world's story is interesting, and every world's ending is the same. He's never allowed himself to show preference. He can't do so. Zayne's parents pack a bag for Shubai with travel essentials, snacks, and the handwritten map. They even suggest he walk the last leg of his journey so he can see the osmanthus trees in bloom. Shubai asks, is beauty really important? The osmanthus trees will eventually become bare. Turns out, Zayne once said nearly the exact same thing. But even he once missed a train stop, distracted by the trees. As Shubai rides the train, we're reminded again of Zayne's inescapable role. The emissary appears when the last fallen leaf turns to soil, and he ends the world without hesitation. Shubai reflects that Zayne has done this in every story he's read, so here it is. Finally confirmed. When Zayne shows up in a world, it means that world is doomed to be destroyed, sooner or later. It's devastating lore. We kinda knew from Zayne's Sacred Chapter Miss, but to have it spelled out so clearly, it now adds a certain weight to everything. It makes you think, wasn't MC supposed to be the one destined to bring an end to the worlds? The destroyer? The one who ends all things? But now it seems like Zayne shares, if not holds, this role too. Were we being misled regarding the MC's role? And that's how the chapter closes. Shubai stepping off the train, determined to find the emissary of the divine. His mission? To remind him of his duty, to let go of seasons destined for destruction, and to never miss his stop again. From gods of destruction to mortals searching for meaning, every story so far asks the same question. What does it mean to live when the planets and stars themselves can die? Chapter 22 Bucket List. This chapter, associated with Raphael, focuses on Aiden, a young man who was present at Raphael's last birthday and deeply admires him, as well as Aiden's grandfather. Aiden is the son of a Lemurian man and a human woman. According to him, he is a definition of average, mediocre grades, unremarkable looks, and introverted, a combination that lets him blend in effortlessly at Verona Middle School. When the lead singer for the school club performance falls ill, Aiden is basically forced to take his place. Everyone just assumes he'll sing well. After all, his family owns a music store and is full of musicians. But they're wrong. Aiden hasn't inherited his family's artistic gifts. Not in music, not in swimming, not in anything creative, really. Through Aiden, we also learn a bit more about Lemurians. Even half Lemurians like him have to soak in the bathtub almost daily to maintain their health, which means someone like Raphael or his aunt Talia probably needs it even more frequently. Instead of going to music class, Aiden sneaks into a lecture about Aridum. Aridum, yes, that desert, the same one Raphael and MC visit during his intertidal zone memoriam. And then Aiden reflects on his own strange connection to it, describing it as a story of a fish falling in love with a bird or a fish abandoning the sea. It's hard not to think of Raphael's level 55 affinities, summer plans, where he tells a made-up tale of a fish and a bird flying together. Coincidence? Or something deeper? Time will tell. Aiden's grandfather appears, frail but energetic, interrupting the class like a man on borrowed time who's not ready to give it back yet. He's fascinated by Aridum's two sacred ideas, Andulu, adventure, and Huluan, freedom. But that's when Aiden realizes what this lesson is really about. His grandfather doesn't just want to study these words, he wants to live them. He has a bucket list, a final promise to himself that even at the end, he'll keep choosing freedom over fear. Item number 1, learn about the desert. Checked. Item number 2, go skydiving. Aiden explains that Lemurians are typically afraid of heights, but as they make the jump together with instructors, he sees something amazing. His grandfather, usually quiet, is screaming with joy, the noisiest bird in the sky, relishing a rare moment of freedom. Then comes item number 3. Go to a rhythm. At a rest stop, Aiden and his grandfather overhear stories about the desert. Many of the people who come to a rhythm are runaways. At a local restaurant, every dish has a story. One of them is called the deity's temptation. It's supposedly the last meal their god ate before disappearing. The Aridids worshipped a man who led them through the desert and helped them survive, only for him to one day leave. Now, I'm not saying this is a case, but it definitely reminded me a lot of Abyss Walker Raphael. Maybe that god didn't run away at all. Maybe he disappeared after meeting the princess, the MC, and eventually taking her to the tomb of the sea god. Like in the Golden Setsmith. Just something to think about. After the fall of Lemuria, the survivors had to stay hidden and cautious, making it nearly impossible to truly be themselves. Aiden is starting to understand how deeply his grandfather longs to reclaim that freedom, and he begins to wonder, does Raphael have a bucket list too? His grandfather then explains something important. His quintessences gives him an unusually long lifespan, almost like immortality. Aiden then muses that maybe Raphael too will never get a chance to just be himself, not unlike the god who left Aridum or his own grandfather. Later, Aiden prepares to attend his first sea moon ceremony. As his grandfather is guided into the deep sea, Raphael stands at the front, singing softly and flawlessly. The melody holds a whisper of freedom and not much pain, perfect for someone making their peaceful final journey. Aiden watches Raphael closely. He sees his strengths, his immortal race, his ability to guide Lemurians back to Lemuria. But to Aiden, Raphael is also just a man, one who paints, creates, and feels. He's not ordinary, but he's not unreachable either. He could choose to be Lemurian, human, or even a bird. And Aiden hopes more than anything that he'll get to hear more stories about Raphael, not as a sea god, but as Raphael. And finally, a note on the title of this last subchapter, 52 Hertz. It refers to the so-called loneliest whale, which sings at a unique frequency, too high for other whales to hear, because their calls' frequencies range from 10 to 40 Hertz. It's a heartbreaking symbol of isolation. I've always believed that Raphael feels deeply alone and trapped, by duty, by past mistakes, by the weight of failing his people, and by losing MC. We have seen it again and again, in chains, inside a box, in restraints. Like Hayden, I hope we'll get more stories where our fishy Raphael is finally free, finally happy. So whether it's Aiden's grandfather or Raphael himself, every Lemurian seems to be chasing the same thing, the right to just be. Chapter 23, Beyond Survival. Sylus' deadliest mission yet? Getting all 4 plushies at a claw machine. This chapter is related to Sylus, and I actually found it quite funny. It follows Meyer, who is an astral enforcer, and it's the first time we learn of the existence of this job. I'm assuming he was sent by the maximum security prison Tartarus, from which Sylus escaped. So far, we are aware of 2 new cosmic level services with this world underneath update: the Interstellar Post Office and the Astral Enforcer. As soon as Meyer found out that the #1 fugitive, Sylus, appeared on Earth, he had to follow. We learn that he made the mechanical masked sentinels that were custom built to hunt Sylus. And they're probably the ones that we saw in the Death and Rebirth update. The world building is slowly getting stronger. We also learn that astral enforcers are taught that desire and emotions are primitive human flaws that hinder Philos' new humans from advancing. So much so that Meyer even avoids contact with his blood relatives. We're also introduced to Meyer's neighbor on Earth, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Lopez owns a hardware store and works out at the climbing gym down the street. Also, he has a crush on the gym's owner. The neighbor eventually knocks on Meyer's door, and he immediately suspects he can be one of Sylus's underlings. But it turns out Mr. Lopez simply wanted some help to fix a heart-shaped LED sign that spelled the word love. Due to his knowledge in electronics, Meyer quickly fixes the LED sign while his neighbor reveals he planned to give it to the gym's owner for her birthday. After yapping for a while about how wonderful the lady is, Mr. Lopez ends up asking Meyer if he thinks the owner of the gym will accept his feelings. Little did the man know, he was asking this of the least adequate person he could think of, right? All this conversation was basically meant for us to realize that love confessions are prohibited in Philos. As a matter of fact, crushes, admiration, and romantic love are condemned as grave sins, as emotions are seen as poisonous seeds of desire that can only germinate to corrode the soul and ignite chaos. As we can see, Philos did that as a way of making sure that nothing that may give rise to unexpected results would flourish. Something or someone just like Sylus. Meyer, as a law-abiding astral enforcer, of course, did not give any answer to such a question. Instead, he returns his focus to the masked sentinels. 3 days ago, Meyer learned that Sylus was planning a major operation for the following week. He was supposed to strike and take all 4 in one go. Meyer thought such an operation may be related to the hunting day's new round at the nest, the Hunters Association recent movements, or the girl that was seen close to Sylus. But he quickly crossed out the third hypothesis, as such a girl could only be a strategy to achieve Sylus's goals. 1 week later, Meyer monitors Sylus' movements remotely, the masked sentinels following his movements from the shadows. However, to Meyer's astonishment, Sylus goes to a beverage shop and comes out with 2 cups of milk tea. How dare he! How dare Sylus! Meyer keeps watching as Sylus goes to a vintage vinyl record store and then emerges with a record. He figures those places must be Intel exchange locations. At a certain point, Sylus actually makes eye contact with Meyer. But guess what? Meyer is still alive because nothing happened after that. In the meantime, one of his mechanical sentinels is found by the passersby. Without time to waste, Meyer issues the order for it to clear the area. But nothing happens, and his remote surveillance feed goes black. Meyer goes to check in on the sentinel, only to see it collapse to the ground. In the distance, he sees Mephisto circling overhead before flying in the direction of Sylus' departing motorbike. Just like in World Underneath Chapter 18, Depths of Chaos, Mephisto did it again. Our favorite crow wrecked the mechanical device again. The Sylus hacker theory? It keeps getting more evidence. Despite another hindrance, Meyer doesn't give up on his mission. He goes to the mall so he can spy on Sylus. Was a transaction going to take place? An armed confrontation? After checking his arsenal to hunt Sylus, Meyer finally spots his target inside the Twinkle toy store. But Sylus is not alone. MC is with him, and they both stare intently at the claw machine. As if Meyer's surprise wasn't big enough, he then sees Sylus using his evil in the claw machine. An evil that could devastate an entire planet was being used to get plushies and a claw machine. This just makes me laugh, really. And it is at this point that Maya realizes that the strikes and the taking all four in one go actually referred to getting four different colored plushies. Incredibly enough, Meyer manages to escape the encounter unscathed, as Sylus simply threw a token at his knee. It turns out Sylus's big operation was a very mundane bait. It's hilarious, but it's also kind of sad, right? Here's this astral enforcer trying to understand why someone would risk everything for love, while Sylus is out there using world-ending power to win a plushie for MC. Meyer never understood Earth or Sylus, the man who chose to become a fiend while destroying and leaving Philos behind, rejecting everything it stood for. And this is pretty much the only piece of lore that we get from this chapter. Sylus's transformation into a dragon was his choice, and not a random situation. And to be honest, that was something I was always wondered about after reading Sylus's Beyond Cloudfall mess, because even when the MC turned into a dragon, it seemed like it was somewhat her choice because she cared for and missed Sylus so much. Did you also get that idea? Without knowing what else to do, Meyer decides to get to know his opponent better. And for that reason, he purchases the same vinyl record Sylus bought. Unfortunately, his record player is broken, and Meyer is forced to ask his neighbor for help. While Mr. Lopez helps him out, the two of them talk about how the gym owner reacted to Mr. Lopez's gift. And it's through this conversation that Meyer learns that falling in love with a wonderful person is beautiful in itself, regardless of whether or not they end up together. And this is an eye-opener to Meyer, because it opposes everything that Philos declared about love. According to its doctrine, a person in love would be governed by greed. But humans don't have possession as love's ultimate goal. Instead, its goal is a way to make them better people. Do you remember how MC and Sylus mention desire, the ruler of all, when they fight in Sylus' Abyss and Sovereign's companion forum? Here we have Meyer realizing that Earthlings gave a new name to the state of having desires. They call it living. Eating, drinking, enjoying life, and the everyday necessities of life. They call it aspirations. And it's just like this that Meyer decides to give a go at friendship with his neighbor, Mr. Lopez. A pretty wholesome chapter, don't you agree? By the way, do you think Meyer will ever understand what Sylus meant by desire? Or is he too far gone into Philos' doctrine? I think there's still a chance. Chapter 24, Crease. In this chapter, we see how Caleb's secret DAA group chat might just be the most wholesome corner of the galaxy. More precisely, all revolves around the DAA's internal forum, Daily Circle. After Patrick returned from an emergency mission and asked Caleb to make a late-night meal, other boys starting to show up with bowls in hands to get served too. That's when Gideon had an idea. He asked everyone to follow his account at MyHeartSource so he would share the dorms, that is Caleb's, secret recipes. He hoped to go viral, but as he didn't, he changed the name of Dormitory Confessions to DAA Heartthrob. Soon enough, the post started going on fire, and that happened every time the DAA Heartthrob posts a new recipe. Gideon is not happy, however, because people ignore him when they comment, and he replies that he was the one who posted the links. Caleb, of course, also takes part in this group, under the nickname @PaperApple. At a certain point, Gideon at MyHeartSource states that he's thinking about all of the guys, and Caleb at PaperApple replies that he's mostly thinking about Miss Apple, the MC. Gideon keeps losing himself in the post, answering every single comment, driving Patrick to make fun of him. But even with all that banter, they all go together to a ceremony and afterwards they return in really high spirits. That signals a strong, healthy friendship, if you ask me. The chapter then goes on to explain how Gideon watched Caleb rise from class heartthrob to Deep Space Aviation Administration heartthrob. However, in DAA, being a heartthrob requires more than a handsome face because the Deep Space Tunnel can easily batter anyone beyond recognition. During their second month on the job, numerous rumors started circulating, making mentions of spies in the DAA and the collapse of the Deep Space Tunnel. On the Daily Circle forum, posts mentioned Ed Pepper Apple asking for an analysis on the patrol data. Silence. In the meantime, Caleb posted on another section assembly updates of his latest airplane model. When other users found that out, they pried for answers and accused Caleb of leading DAA to its ruin. However, when Caleb completed another mission, he brought back a protocore from a wanderer that was the real culprit behind the anomalies. The rumors eventually died out, and Gideon's At My Heart source had become the new spam post king and described the mission in full detail. These missions kept getting more dangerous, and most pilots had been working around the clock without any rest. Even so, Gideon could have never imagined that Paper Apple's model assembly updates would forever remain on a page showing only scattered parts. Everything seems to change when everyone gets recommended an article about the truth behind the Far Space Fleet's reform. The article implies that the Far Space Fleet has reached a deep space tunnel depths that exceeds that of the DAA's due to its stronger cruising and combat capabilities. In that thread, the new recruits also discussed how the Far Space Fleet's newly appointed colonel was mysterious, his background unknown. They wondered what attitude he would have towards the DAA and speculated that he must not have any reverence for DAA or any attachment to Earth. Well, they couldn't be any more wrong if they tried. All that Caleb thinks about is the MC, who's on Earth. But they don't know who the colonel is. Gideon and Patrick show up, and the recruits salute him and then leave, wrapping their arms around each other. Both friends watch them walk away and remember how they were when Caleb was still with them in the DAA. Despite it all, Gideon says he has made peace with it, and that it was a surprise Caleb stayed with them for that long. The last subchapter shows us Gideon giving his team a rundown of the mission objectives and reassuring one of the juniors. To calm himself down, the junior started to make some of the most common model poses from DAA Heartthrob's post to get his protective blessing. Poor Gideon. He remembers his friend Caleb and ends up mimicking the junior's pose too. At the entrance of the Deep Space Tunnel, the DAA's patrol crosses paths with the Far Space Fleet, and each goes their separate ways. A friendship come undone, left with bittersweet memories. There's not much lore in this chapter. It's simply a tale of how good friends had to go their separate ways that also gives us a little insight into Caleb's life outside of his interactions with the MC. And there's something so human about it. These almost larger-than-life pilots bonding over food and social media posts, and then just drifting apart. It's not epic or dramatic. It's the kind of quiet loss that hurts more because it feels real. And that's how the DAA's brightest hearts drifted into different skies. Proof that even in deep space, friendships leave creases we never quite smooth out. So, across these 5 chapters, every story, whether it's a letter from a dying world, a boy chasing the emissary, or Sylus conquering the claw machine, comes back to one thing: connection. In Love and Deepspace, love isn't weakness. It's rebellion against a universe built on cold order. Which chapter hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed traveling through the Deep Space Tunnel with me, drop a like so more cuties and Deep Space Hunters can find us. Until next time, this is Princess Farron signing out. Take care, good gaming.